All right. Executive branch. The executive branch of our federal government is found under Article 2. Article 2 of the United States Constitution is where you will find everything you need to know about the executive branch. That will be a test question.
What?
Which article explains the duties, response, and the responsibility of the executive branch? Today, the current president, as you all know, is Donald J. Trump. He is the head of the executive branch. His current term will end in 2020. If he is reelected, then he will have a second 4-year term.
What does the J stand for?
I believe it's John.
I thought it was James.
I thought it was Gerald.
Sound like a good research project for you guys.
Extra credit?
I don't do extra credit.
Yeah, you should.
Nah. You will need to identify who the president is. In 1951, the 22nd Amendment was passed, and it placed a 2-term limit on the presidency. Up to that point, until FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt being president, all presidents honored the tradition that George Washington started in self-limiting themselves to 2 terms. FDR says, the heck with tradition, I'm going to continue on. And he was reelected 4 times. Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He died in office. And then after that, they said, you know what, that's not good to have somebody in power that long. So they passed this 22nd Amendment. Not 2 years, it's 4-year terms with a max of 2 terms.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Wasn't Franklin Roosevelt during like World War
Uh-uh. That's World War II
Oh.
that he was president.
Like I knew it was one of them. I just
Yep. Teddy Roosevelt did not get reelected right before World War I. He,
Wasn't Theodore Roosevelt and Franklin Roosevelt related?
they're cousins.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so the question that remains, and there was a lot of speculation about this, was can a president sit out 1 term and then come back and run again?
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's nothing that prevents him from doing that.
It's just weird.
It is. No president's done that since 1951.
Yes, sir.
And there was some speculation that maybe President Obama would come back and try it again.
Yes, sir.
But that was like a year or so ago. I haven't heard any talk about it now. But there was some talk about it at that time.
He's just trying to resurface from Europe being completely silent.
Oh, he's out gallivanting around making money.
Yeah.
He's probably out playing golf.
All right, so now we need to playing golf. So now we need to take a look at the powers and authority of the president. Remember, these are enumerated, they are delegated in Article 2. First of all, he's Commander-in-Chief, Commander-in-Chief of Armed Forces. Now, originally, he was the Commander-in-Chief during war. That has now been at least implied he's Commander-in-Chief at all times. Even when I was in, we considered him the Commander-in-Chief, even though we weren't at war. He can commission officers, both federal officers as well as military. He can call Congress into session for special circumstances. For example, if Congress goes on their spring break and they're gone for 10 days, and we have let's say we are bombed by North Korea. Say they send a missile over to Hawaii and bombs Hawaii, or bombs Japan for that matter. That would be an emergency enough that he would most likely call Congress back into session and may well declare war. Remember, only Congress can do that, and he may ask them to do that. He can also grant pardons and reprieves. So one of the talk in the news is, will President Trump pardon Paul Manafort, which was he worked on Trump's campaign for about a year or so, maybe 7 months. Wasn't that long. And the FBI targeted him in the Russia investigation and found that he did nothing with Russia working for Trump. But come to find out, he did not report some of the money he made working for a Ukrainian politician, nor did he register himself as a foreign agent working for another country. So he's going to go away for 7 years. That on federal charges. President Trump could issue a pardon for him, and he never he's in jail now, but he may not. If he gets a pardon, he'll be out nearly immediately and not to spend any more time. However, just in case, remember so much of this is politics, just in case President Trump does this, the New York State Attorney General has filed charges against Paul Manafort to make sure he spends the rest of his life in jail, even if Trump pardons him, because the president has no authority to pardon state charges. So even if he's pardoned under federal charges, the state of New York is planning on sending this guy to prison the rest of his life.
Is it 7 years enough?
Well, you would think so, but at his age, he may not even make, he's in poor health, he's already in a wheelchair. He may not even make the 7 years.
Wait, so why are they putting him away at that age? Don't they like not put old people in
Oh
jail?
no, they still do. He can also receive ambassadors and representatives of foreign governments. The Senate can't do that. The House can't do that. If Russia wants to send an ambassador to talk to the president on behalf of President Putin, Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, they can do that and he can meet with them. Now, where are you going to find these enumerated powers? In Article 2, that's right. Now, where in these powers do you see that the President of the United States, through executive order, provide you and I with affordable health care?
Nowhere.
Nowhere at all. What about free college? Is there anywhere in here that states that you can have free college?
No, sir.
He has no authority to grant that to you. When you hear the presidential candidates talk, like Bernie Sanders and some of the others, about free health care and free college, he's full of baloney. He has no authority to offer any of that. If you go back to Article 1, under the enumerated powers of Congress, is there anywhere in the enumerated powers that says Congress can provide free college and free health care, or should, or it's their duty to, with tax dollars? Nowhere at all. We may want these things, ladies and gentlemen, but that government, the federal government, has no authority under the Constitution to provide it. Your state government, on the other hand, is where it's supposed to be reserved, and if the state of Idaho wants to do that, that's up to them. Up to them, and meaning you and I. The federal government has no authority to do that. And that's one reason why it went to court, saying, wait a minute here, the federal government has no authority to force us to buy something we do not want.
Why do we have to buy insurance?
Huh?
Why do we have to buy car insurance?
Now, that's a little different. You're choosing to drive on the roads. Driving is a privilege. It is not a right. And if you're going to choose to drive on the roads, then you have to ensure the other drivers that if you run into them, they're going to be compensated. Okay, that should be executes. That should be executes federal law. Sorry, I went through my slides quickly this morning and missed that one. That should be executes federal law. That means carry out the laws that Congress has passed and the president has signed. Whether he signed it or the previous president, doesn't matter. He is in charge of executing those laws. Now that's very important because, and we're going to keep coming back to the immigration discussion because that's the hot button, that's the hot topic of the day, and will be for some time. Congress 15 years ago passed the law, passed a law that stated the wall would be built. They authorized the wall. The president is responsible for doing it. The problem is the last three presidents haven't. And Trump says, wait a minute, the law says the wall is to be built. I'm going to build the wall. Do not blame our presidents for the laws that are passed unless he signed them. Because the president, all he can do is veto. He can either sign them into law or veto. He wasn't in office when that law was passed.
He's following it?
Huh?
Following it?
He's following it, yes. He's doing what the Constitution says he must do.
So that's why everybody hates it?
Yes, because he's actually doing what he's supposed to do. He's not playing ball with the other, with as he would call the swamp. He also appoints ambassadors, federal judges, and what's considered high officials, like cabinet members. Now, this is done through advice and consent of the Senate. They make sure that the person's qualified, for example. He's not just appointing his daughter to be the ambassador of France because she likes French people. Where the Senate would ask, what's her qualifications for that position? They'd make sure that this was a good appointment. That's what they're supposed to do. But again, everything has become so politicized. Look at the Brett Kavanaugh consent hearings. One of the most brilliant jurists in the country. Didn't matter to a certain political party. Like Brett Kavanaugh said, it had become, this consent process had become a consent and destroy, or advise and destroy. If the oldest Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Ginsburg, dies before President Trump is finished with office, you'll see another major, in even a bigger fight for the next nominee. I believe it'll be a female. She's a Notre Dame law professor. She might be on the federal court too, in one of those districts over there. But that she was probably picked number 2, with Brett Kavanaugh being number 1. I would suspect she would be the next nominee for the Supreme Court if President Trump gets another shot at it. Ginsburg has said she's not going to retire until after Trump is out of office, hoping that a Democrat is the president and therefore would nominate somebody like her, has her point of view regarding international law and liberal policies and stuff. She's considered the most liberal justice on the court, and has even said we should not look at the Constitution but look at international law as well, which is a violation of the Constitution itself. Ruth Ginsburg? Remind me, I'll pull up a picture later. Yes. They keep pumping juice in her to keep her alive. She's just had lung cancer removed and had, for the first time in years, in fact, maybe even ever, had missed some court cases. So there was a lot of speculation that she was in worse health than what she said, but she's back on the bench now. And she is one tough bird for sure. So. Yep. Okay. He also approves, could be a she at some point. We always say he because it's never been a female yet, but that could change. There are several females running for the Democratic Party. We'll see what happens. But nonetheless, the president, keep it gender neutral, I guess, the president can either approve or veto legislation passed by Congress. Yes, Michaela.
Are there any female representatives for the Republican Party?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
For president?
No. Oh, yeah. Carly Fineon. I can't say her last name.
Whatever that is.
Yeah, she ran for president. She was one of the first ones to drop out. She was a former HP CEO, but she ran for the presidential ticket. I think there's been a few other females too, but I would suspect Not this next election cycle, but the one after, the one when Trump won't be up for election. So if he is reelected in 2020, be 2024, I suspect we're going to see Nikki Haley run for president. She's a very strong Republican woman. She's from, I think, North or South Carolina, and she was our ambassador to the United Nations for a while. She's resigned, and there's a lot of speculation she might be getting ready to run. There was some speculation she's going to run against Trump. I don't think that's going to happen, but I would not be surprised to see her in the next cycle. Not this cycle coming, but the next one. Yeah. Problem is, that's a long time to be out of the picture. So that was what was surprising for her to step down. You would think she would have waited until after 2020 to have stepped down and then get ready to run. So we're not sure what's going on there, but I certainly would expect to see her. So we'll see what happens. So he has 10 days to veto legislation. 10 days to veto legislation. This last weekend, he issued his first veto. So the House and Senate drafted a resolution of some sort condemning. That's what they're doing, is condemning President Trump for declaring a national emergency. They wanted to remove his national emergency declaration regarding the border. So that there was just enough to pass in the Senate and the House. He vetoed it immediately. Congress has just a few days, because he's going to send it back. They probably already have it back today. Send it back, and now they're going to have to try to do what's called an override. They have to have 2/3 majority to override. And most pundits say they don't have it. So the veto is going to stand. But we'll see. There were like 15 Republicans that crossed over to the Democrat side and voted against President Trump. So we'll see what happens. But I did not hear anybody say for sure that it would happen. Most of them said, there's a small chance, but they're not expecting to see an override. That doesn't happen very often. So if Congress adjourns within the president's 10 days, if the president does not sign it, the legislation is automatically vetoed. That's called a pocket veto. He doesn't have to do anything. Let's say they pass something right before spring break, and they go home. They're out of session. And they're out for 15 days, so it's within that 10-day window. He doesn't have to do anything with it, and it automatically dies. That happens once in a while as well. Usually, it has to do with politics. He don't want to have to put his name on something. And of course, they don't have to schedule votes, so it happens that way. But usually when it happens, it's scheduled to be voted for a reason on that day so that the president can pocket veto and be able to say during the next election, hey, I didn't vote against it. I didn't veto it. Well, technically he did by not doing. Inaction is a veto. But he will be able to say, I didn't veto that. They should have got it to me sooner.
So it wouldn't be his fault. It'd be theirs. They should have hurried up.
That's true. That's how he's going to. Couch it. So again, the president can make treaties, but with the advice and consent of the Senate. So the War Powers Act. This is something that may be repealed. War Powers Resolution of 1973. It's also known as the War Powers Act. Prior to November 1973, the president could call up and deploy troops whenever he wanted during wartime. During wartime, which means a declaration of war.
That means no troops would be able to mobilize off of war.
Now, Congress passed and overrode the presidential veto requiring congressional approval within 60 days of deployment. So the president can respond to something, but he has to get approval within 60 days, otherwise the troops got to come home. A lot of people would like to remove this or repeal this law because it takes too much power away from Congress regarding military action and gives it too much to a president who can willy-nilly send a Tomahawk missile here or there. Now, they didn't talk about removing this power until President Trump became president. It was fine when the Democrats were in power. It was fine when the other Republicans were in power. But heaven forbid should President Trump do the very same thing that the other presidents have done. Now, personally, I think that's probably the right thing to do. Repeal it. Because Congress is the one that needs to declare war. But at the same time, the commander-in-chief needs the ability to respond to a crisis at any time. So how do you balance that? I don't know yet. And their answer in 1973 was to give a War Powers Act to the president, which would give the president 60 days to get all the intelligence together and explain to Congress what's going on.
You spelled Constitution.
I probably did. Yep, I sure did. Constitution spelt wrong.
You are an American. I'm disappointed.
I know. But notice that Constitution is capitalized. Anytime you're referring to the United States Constitution, it's always capitalized. If you're referring generically to any constitution, then it's lowercase. But Constitution, when we refer to the United States Constitution, is always capitalized. Yeah, spelled wrong. I am going to ask you on the test about the War Powers Act. I might even tell you, this is what it is. Explain to me why some senators would like to repeal the law. Reason that question's important is because you're going to be in a position to give your opinion to your representatives, who is going to be the ones repealing the law, if they get enough support to do that. I would be surprised if they don't at some point. At least make an attempt. He also has the authority to staff the offices, should be the offices, of the President and the White House. These people, he gets to hire and fire as he pleases. It's what's called serving at the pleasure of the President. So long it pleases the President, you get to work for him. When you no longer please him, you're done. Of course, you're free to leave too. You can resign. If you don't like what's going on, you can resign. The number one person in the White House staff is the chief of staff. You do not get to the president without going through him. Or her. In this case, it's a him. They just replaced General John Kelly. He resigned, retired at the first of the year. Now they've got a new person. Mick Mulvaney, I think, is the chief of staff.
Did he make Mad Dog Mattis retire?
Did he make him? No. Mad Dog retired as the Secretary of Defense, which we're going to get there, so hold on. He didn't make him, but we'll talk about that. The press secretary, currently that's Sarah Huckabee Sanders, kind of a pit bull on the podium. Doesn't take a whole lot of guff from the media. They make fun of her on Saturday Night Live. She's not thin and, model looking, if you will. So they make fun of her weight and stuff like that on Saturday Night Live and other spoofs. Pretty disrespectful. He also gets to choose his own legal counsel. What's that?
I was like, why is it okay to ever talk about a woman's weight?
I don't know. But Saturday Night Live thinks it's fine.
Why is it so important?
What's that?
I said, why is it so important?
What's important?
About a person, like the weight.
I-
It's so annoying.
It is. I don't understand it either. But I tell you, it wasn't that long ago, you didn't marry a skinny girl. Skinny girl was a sign that she was not healthy, that she wasn't going to live very long and wasn't able to produce strong kids. You want the robust woman is the one you married. So my mom, I was still in high school. She went to Vietnam on a missionary trip, medical missionary trip, and this little Vietnamese guy comes up to my mom, and she's got the physique of a German and of old world German. And the guy comes up, little short Vietnamese guy, and he starts grabbing her and just feeling her all over her belly, her arms. And he goes, "Oh my goodness, you must be rich. You must be rich." He was already wanting to marry her. Her robustness indicated to him that she had lots of money and therefore could buy food. And so she was like prime marriage material in his eyes. So,
Mom listens to your slides.
yeah, she does. And she's going, what? Ah! So, in a lot of countries it's still that way, but we have gotten so sex and size obsessed in our country with the media that, yeah, totally screwy with it.
Somebody left their ass
Oh, where did they leave it?
in the bathroom.
In the bathroom?
Well, not on the floor or anything. It was on the counter.
Ah, well, that's better than the floor.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah. All right. We have several different councils that provides advice to the president. Collectively, these are called the Executive Office of the President. The names of these councils, pretty self-explanatory regarding what they do. And they keep going. National Economic Council, U.S. Trade Representative, huh?
National Economic Council is over twice.
Yep.
This is the last one on the last slide.
Okay, that's a duplicate. Good. So there's over 2,500 employees performing very defined managerial tasks. Now, what's interesting is a lot of these places are closed down when they have a government shutdown and they have what they call, quote, non-essential federal workers go on leave.
But I have a question.
Yes?
If they're part of the government, shouldn't they be essential?
Say that a little louder to make sure that's on the recording.
If they're part of the government, shouldn't they be essential?
I'm not sure that's loud. Hang on, try it again.
Shouldn't they be essential if they're part of the government?
Yes. That is part of the argument that conservatives, especially fiscal conservatives, have during these budget debates. If we can get along without them, then why are they even employed? If they're non-essential, why are they employed? That's always going to be the question. How many of you noticed the world turned upside down during the last shutdown?
No.
We still got food delivered, mail still got delivered, welfare checks came, food stamps came, we still had school lunch, yay. We still had school. We didn't notice. The reality is these budget debates that they have really do not affect most, I'm not saying it doesn't affect any, it doesn't affect most people. Because the essential workers are still working. What's the what?
The memes.
The memes.
That's
Yeah.
true, though.
We didn't save any money. Not one penny was saved because Congress allowed everyone to be paid. Even contractors who didn't do any work got paid. Yep. And you all will get to pay for it through your taxes.
Yippee.
You already owe something like $60,000 each to the federal government.
Already?
Already, yeah. When I started teaching in 2008, it was $44,000. Oh, it keeps going
A
up.
lot of interest, bro.
You're going to end up paying more than that. Your Social Security that you pay on your out of your paycheck, you'll never see. You'll never get it when you retire. But you're going to have to keep paying it.
That's if we
Why?
get to retire.
You probably won't. You guys won't. I don't think I will. You'll have to pull my old carcass out of that seat over there. It is.
We'll just get you a waterbed. We'll just get you a waterbed.
Oh, no. Oh.
That's nasty.
Listen up. Next slide. Pay attention. Harlan. If your mama's listening to this at home, she's going to hear you called out. Article 2, Section 2. List the authority of the president to appoint cabinet members. There are currently 15 federal agencies. Some people call this the fifth branch of government, the bureaucracy. You don't get to vote for these people. Customer service is not their concern. Try going to Social Security office in Caldwell and see that real quick. That is a mess.
The DMV too.
DNV is a local issue, but very similar. But you don't get to vote for these people, and they can't, other than the heads of these agencies, the others can't just be fired for doing bad service. They are entrenched in the service. It is what has become known as, at least in part, as the deep state. Have you been following that? The Russian investigation on President Trump, there's this term that has come up, the deep state, where certain individuals within our government has been working to subvert a duly elected president. That would be under these agencies. Each of the heads are appointed by the president with the advice and consent of the Senate. He can fire them without their consent. So when FBI Director James Comey was fired, I don't know, a year and a half ago or something like that, people threw a fit. They lost their minds over it. How dare President Trump do that? He has no right. He has every right. In fact, he's the only one that does. Now, the guy could be impeached and then removed from office, but the president can hire and fire whoever he wants for those positions. And recently, you'll see who the current guy is. We're on our second, not second FBI director. It was the Attorney General I was thinking of. The FBI director now is, for the life of me, I can't remember now. They've had several change-ups since then, but he had every authority to fire him for no reason at all. But he certainly had reason, as we now have found out.
You can fire him just because you can?
Yep. Because the department heads serve at the president's discretion. And your job is to carry out the president's agenda. If you disagree with his agenda, you should either do what General Mattis did, step down, or you're going to be fired. If you can't convince the president your way is right, then you have one or two options. Crash and burn and be fired, or be a man and step down. General Mattis, while I'm not totally agreeing with his reason for stepping down, I think President Trump I'd like to see us get out of some of these wars, but he realized, I don't agree with the president on this, and I cannot serve him in his interest. He did the right thing to step down and not sit there and try to undermine the president.
Save himself the embarrassment.
Yeah, really.
I really know that's a job as embarrassment.
Yeah.
So, the Agriculture Department is headed up by Sonny Perdue.
Looks like every ag teacher ever.
I mean, you're not wrong.
Honestly,
The U.S. Federal Executive Department responsible for developing and executing federal laws relating to farming, forestry, and food. For example, Haley, if you're still going to Job Corps, this department heads up Job Corps. It was originally founded by Abraham Lincoln in 1862, and it's headquartered in Washington, D.C., and get this, as of 2007, 105, almost 106,000 employees, federal employees, that you pay for, you and I pay for. Some of them are park rangers. Most of them are U.S. Department of Forest Service, USDA, doing food inspections, stuff like that. We're almost halfway. Take a break. How about a couple more? If we can go for another 10, then we'll have a 10-minute break.
Sounds like a deal.
So we get out, about 20 after, so I'll split the difference. All right, switching.
Can we abbreviate that?
Oh, I would. Whatever shorthand you need to do. What, you need to go back?
No, I didn't know we could abbreviate.
Sure you can. Whatever it takes for your notes. Commerce Department, headed up by Wilbur Lewis Ross Jr. He's the Secretary of Commerce. The organization's main purpose is to create jobs, promote economic growth, and encourage sustainable development and improve standards of living of all Americans. Among its tasks are gathering economic and demographic data for businesses and government decision-making and helping to set industry standards. It originally was formed in 1903, and it too is headquartered in Washington, D.C. What's that? This? Oh, I probably would not qualify. These guys spent their entire lifetime in that kind of work. Now, the U.S. Department of Education, I'd be up for that.
Why, what would you do make changes to?
I would help abolish it. Send it all back to the state.
Would you make it so that the country's not in charge of education?
That's what I just said. I would abolish it and send it all back to the states where it belongs.
Could you do that?
Then the states could decide that. Right now, the federal government decides that.
Wait, so what is your belief on Common Core?
It's terrible.
So why are we doing it?
Because the state wants the federal dollars. And the Fed said, you can have this money if you adopt these standards. The state said, okay, we're addicted to federal money. We'll take it.
Or we could just not, you know?
Well, the alternative is then, where do you get the millions of dollars that the state gets to replace? Partially would be cuts. You'd have to cut somewhere. Some school districts are very bloated with staff. But could we handle any more cuts at this school?
We could, but.
No, we couldn't, but we would have to. It would trickle down. So that's the dilemma the state had. Now, I think I would rather pay more taxes to pay for my own local stuff than to be beholden to a foreign, to 3,000 mile away capital. Does that make sense? If it's my choice and the school board's choice to do something, now we have real liberty. We have real freedom then. And I'm willing to pay for that. Now, how much, I don't know. But that's ultimately what our taxes would have to go up to help offset some of that.
So why wouldn't we just do that?
Because nobody wants to raise taxes on themselves. As long as we can get the, quote, free money from Washington, D.C. and not raise our taxes, why wouldn't we? See, our legislators sell out the people, sell out the freedom of the people for the easy money. It's very hard to raise taxes on your own people. But it's easy to get it, quote, the free money.
It's not free though.
It isn't. You're right. You're absolutely right.
The only reason it's quote unquote free is because every time we take more money, we're losing our freedom.
Yeah,
Well, it's not
exactly.
freedom, it's our liberty.
Uh-huh. You're right. A lot of parents wouldn't pay. You'd go without. Well, there's some kids who don't eat unless they come to school. All right. Secretary of Defense is currently Patrick Shannon.
Wasn't it Mad Dog Madison?
It used to be General Mad Dog Mattis. He resigned at the end of the year, end of last year, because he decided he couldn't support President Trump's foreign policy.
Isn't it because Trump wanted to pull out of wars?
Yes, President Trump wanted to pull all out of Syria right away, and that did not fly with General Mattis or many in the military community. And so since then, President Trump has backtracked a little bit and reevaluated and said, okay, we're going to leave some in, but we're bringing some back. So the libertarians, politicians wanted all of the military back, even one is out of South Korea. And our military would not be in favor of that either. So, but it's always a balance between that. He's in charge. Huh?
How many active wars is the U.S. fighting?
Wars or conflicts?
Conflict.
I don't know. Many. There's a lot we're not even aware of. So the Defense Department was formed in 1947. It's headquartered at the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. It's the largest employer in the world. Has 742 civilian employees, 1.3 million active duty, 826 National Guard and Reserves, has a total budget of 2.86 million total as of 2018. The annual taxes used as of 2019, are you ready for this? $717 billion.
How much do we spend on our military?
Not just military, of this department.
Travel.
Where would you take it from? Remember, if you're going, remember the principles of scarcity. Okay, you're in econ. Remember the principles of scarcity. If you have, and cost benefit analysis, okay, if you're going to take 1/3 of that from the Defense Department, give it somewhere else, what is the Defense Department not going to be able to do now? Maybe that's something we need to be doing though. What do you cut? That is the Congress's job, ladies and gentlemen, to decide what programs to fund. Well, I don't know that I would agree with that. It's government. There's always going to be lots of waste. Private sector will always be more efficient than a government sector.
Dang it, now the vegans are mad at you.
So there's lots of waste in all these departments. So Michaela, or whoever it was, said I should be in the Commerce Department. This is the department that I would be better suited for, the Education Department. The Education Department is a fairly new department. The primary functions of the Department of Education is to establish policy for administrator and coordinate most federal assistance to education, collect data on U.S. schools, and enforce federal education laws regarding privacy and civil rights. It began in 1980. 1980 is when it began.
The Education Department?
Yes. Created after the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare was split into the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Welfare.
Bless you.
It was signed into law by President Carter in 1979. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C. It has 3,900 employees to the cost of $68 billion. That was in the year 2016. I haven't looked at this year's budget. $68 billion of your dollars is spent in Washington, D.C.
I don't have any money, so it's not my money.
That is $68 billion, ladies and gentlemen, the federal government would not need to collect and leave it at the state level for the states to collect and give out to where they think is best needed.
Why don't we start with efficient yet today?
Well, President Trump, originally, part of his campaign was to abolish it. And some people thought he would hire somebody for this position who would help him do that, and now he's backtracked on that. Well, perhaps that might be part of it, but I'm not sure that he has, as president, I don't think he has the authority to abolish a cabinet, because this was signed into law by Congress passed it, Carter signed it, so I'm not sure how it came about. But the issue is it constitutional? Is there anything in Article 2 that says the president should establish a cabinet, or that the federal government in Articles 1 or 2 has any authority over local education? Or just education in general? There's not one word about it. Therefore, based on the 10th Amendment, it should be left for the states. So people have argued all along that a lot of these are not constitutional. It very likely would have some differences, yes. But here's the thing. It would be up to the people to decide what kind of education they want their kids to have.
Depending on how much money do they actually want to invest.
That's right. If Idaho parents really think education is important, they will invest in it, but it will be their choice. That's what we call liberty, ladies and gentlemen.
Isn't it cool?
That's what I heard, yeah, that there's a big benefactor.
Theoretically, couldn't President Trump, he can elect and get rid of these people, right?
Not elect, he can choose. Yep, he
Yeah.
can fire Betsy DeVos.
So why doesn't he just fire her and never put anyone back in there, or everyone in that division and just not use it?
Because people underneath her are employees. He can't just fire them. They're federal civil servants. That's the bureaucracy. No matter, see, here's this thing to remember. Most of the time, it does not matter who the president is. Nothing changes. You know why? The people underneath these cabinet levels don't change. You can change this person, education policy remains the same because of everybody underneath them. You can't fire them. They are in the system. They are civil servants. They're employees of you and I, and therefore you can't just hire and fire them. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether Superintendent Ibarra is elected or somebody else over at the state level. The policies will continue to be the same. Common Core is here. Doesn't matter who's elected. The only way it's going to go away is if the House and Senate of Idaho passes a law to remove it. They never passed a law to brought it in, but the bureaucracy brought it in. The only way they now can get rid of it is by law. And there's no movement to do that. There's been some states that have now. Yes.
So, if the state wanted to, they could stop taking funding from the federal government and fund education themselves to have it
Yes.
the way they want it.
Idaho could say we don't want 1 penny of federal money. And if they do that, then Idaho would have full control over its education.
Wouldn't that make the federal government mad?
Sure it would. And they would fight you, try to get you to keep taking the money. But if I try to give you a $100 bill and you don't want it, and I try to shove it in your pocket and you take it out, can I really make you take it? No. No. No matter how hard I try, if you don't want it, you don't have to take it. Yes.
Can you go on break?
Oh my God.
No, because we get out at 1:20. I said we split the difference, 1:10.
We get a 10-minute break.
I thought you said it was less than 10 minutes. You said 10 minutes.
Well,
You meant 10-minute break.
I'm going to switch and bait you then. Call me President Obama. You can have your break and keep it if you want it. How's that? So we will go on break at 10:10 or 13:10. The Energy Department is headed up by the former Texas Governor, Rick Perry. He ran for president, did not last too long against President Trump during the primaries. So President Trump appointed him to the Department of Energy. Now, why would the governor of Texas, ex-governor of Texas, be a good pick, at least in Trump's mind, to head up the Energy Department?
Oil?
You betcha. Because the Energy Department puts regulations out on oil drilling and other things. What's that?
What
Would
better?
he then hire this senator in Alaska?
There's more oil in Texas than there is in Alaska.
Alaska's harder.
Well, yeah.
You could, but he was much more popular. Remember, one of the best things you can do when you run as a candidate is get your opponents on your side. Because a lot of people liked Rick Perry. If you can put him on your cabinet, that's a win.
Would you try to run again?
I don't think this go around. He's probably done. That's tough work. So the Energy Department is responsible for the United States policies regarding energy and safety and handling of nuclear material. Its responsibilities include the nation's nuclear weapons program, nuclear reaction production of the United States Navy, energy conservation, energy-related research.
Wait, why is the Energy Department in charge of the nuclear weapons program?
Because that's energy.
It's energy.
But
It's energy. Radioactive waste disposal, that part, ladies and gentlemen, is a major issue for Idaho. We have lots of radioactive waste in southeast Idaho at the INEL. It's a nuclear reaction facility, it's a testing center.
You know, Idaho was the first state ever to use nuclear power.
Yes.
Awesome. They
We
have
drove through that town from
they have a museum out.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've been there and ended up getting yelled at because I crossed over the yellow line. Oh, it was like 1 foot. And, oh my God, and they took me away from the group and had to do one of those Geiger counter, see if I was exposed to radiation. I go, if that little line is going to make the difference between radiation exposure and not, this is not a safe facility. It was ridiculous. I mean, they were freaked out. It's like, dude, settle down. This is not like, I'm not bleeding to death.
That's kind of how that works, though. But It literally just
The radio-
doesn't go.
The radiation's afraid of yellow lines.
That's a good one, AJ. All right, it was formed in 1977. It was formed in 1977 for the purpose of coming up with ways to conserve energy. It's headquartered in Washington, D.C. It has almost 13,000 employees, 93,000 contract employees, and guess what its annual budget is?
A couple billion.
Oh, I wish.
50 billion.
As of 2015, $27.9 billion.
27?
$27.9 billion. Not horrible. Billion? Huh, okay. I guess compared to what?
I mean, compared to literally everything else, and compared to,
All right, this will probably be our last one for the day. The Health and Human Services Department. Yes, that is where our welfare comes from. So if that's, for example, if food stamps had stopped coming, it would be because this department stopped flowing food stamps to the states.
He looks like a weasel.
He's an interesting looking individual, sure.
Mr. Bean.
Say that again so it can be heard on the...
Mr. Bean.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. All right, it was formed 53 years ago. And this was split out of three other... when they split this department, we ended up getting two others. One of those was the education department. It's headquartered in D.C. It has over 79,000 employees and a budget of $1.3 billion.
Oh my God.
So the least amount out of the weapons.
So far, $1.3 billion.
They're like, yeah, education and people being alive is not important.
it's okay. Oil's super important.
Apparently it's killing people too.
We have time to do one more, I think. Actually, you guys are probably still writing this down, aren't you? All right, so this will be our last one then. We will pick this up tomorrow. We're actually only about 10 slides away from being done with the executive branch. Remember, all of these individuals work for the president. They are responsible for carrying out the laws that Congress has passed. Sometimes laws are passed, but it doesn't tell you how to do it. That's what these agencies are supposed to do. They break them down into procedures and policies in order to execute the law that's been passed.